Colin Kaepernick, NFL anthem protests, and Nike. Let's get ready to rumble. Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the Wright Brothers. We appreciate y'all taking this time once again to come back and join us. First and foremost, shout out to all of our members in the tribe. We appreciate each and every one of y'all. We are almost 2,000 strong now, so please continue to help us spread the word that identity politics is dead. Now, today, what we want to talk about is some of the recent developments in the news cycle, specifically as they relate to Colin Kaepernick, the NFL, and the Nike brand. Now, there's so much
do we have to?
There's so much to unpack with this. Honestly, we're going to try to keep these videos as brief as possible, but we also want to make sure that we have these conversations. As we always say in each video, the only way to make free thought great again is by being willing to have the conversation. So without further ado, I'll go ahead and take the lead. So basically, what's gone on over these last several years, as all of you well know, is the NFL has been afflicted with the recent phenomenon of kneeling during the national anthem. Now, I think it goes without saying how me and my brother feel about this, but we've seen this continue to gain momentum over time. And what we have to keep in mind too is that this was spearheaded by one main figurehead, and his name is Colin Kaepernick. I kind of want to get Eddie's take on Colin Kaepernick and his rise to prominence in a form completely different than his preferred discipline, if you will. And I want you to take the floor now and give me your thoughts on how the anthem protests really got started, because it's important to remember how it got started to begin with.
Well, yeah, Damati, and honestly, at this point, everybody, whether you're a sports fan or not, it has a take on Colin Kaepernick's protest and what it's grown into at this point. But what I always try to tell people, and what I think is important to remember, is that this whole kneeling thing that seems oh so noble and well, it is peaceful, but on his end, remember that it did not always start out like that. What it started out as was Colin Kaepernick was disgruntled because he was losing his starting position as the starting quarterback of the San Francisco 49ers. He was in the process of losing that job to a backup named Blaine Gabbert out of Mizzou, I believe. And no disrespect to Mr. Gabbert, but he's not an elite NFL quarterback, and Kaepernick views himself as such. And because his performance that had waned over the previous few years after his Super Bowl loss to the Baltimore Ravens, he was just disgruntled. So during the national anthem, his protest started with him just sitting on the bench chilling. That was it. It was no, let's take a knee. It's no, let's do this for police brutality. There was just no, let's take a moment to remember our fallen brothers. No, it started out as a disgruntled backup quarterback sulking on the bench during the national anthem. Cameras caught on to him. It started to turn into a thing, and then a veteran in the West Coast area, I can't remember exactly where he was stationed. A veteran was the one who suggested that maybe he should adopt a more respectful stance during his protest during the national anthem. But by then, the precedent had already kind of been set, and in my mind, the damage had already been done. So it's always important to remember where this all started. But no matter where you fall on the anthem protest, like Damani and I said, we are vehemently against it. It goes against everything that we believe the national anthem should stand for and the flag does stand for. But what you should stop and recall is that this is not the time or the place to protest. And I don't really care what you're protesting. You could be protesting something that I am completely in favor of you protesting. We've already had our video on police brutality and can minorities trust police or not. But even if they were protesting something that I agreed with, I wouldn't agree that the national anthem is the time and place to do it. The national anthem, when we stand to honor the flag, honor the people who fought for that flag, honor the freedoms that the flag symbolizes for us, that is a very unique time in the pantheon of America moments for us to stop and focus on what galvanizes us together as a society. Of course, there's always going to be divisions. Of course, there are always going to be problems. There's always going to be social injustice. But for that one 2-minute and change stretch, we get to ruminate on what is great about our country. What are the ties that bind us together as Americans? What is the common ground that we can stand on with that flag? And while you have the right to protest when and where you want, given whether your employer is okay with it, of course, if you choose to remove the spotlight from unifying concepts to something that is inherently divisive because of the manner in which you protest or the content of your protest, you're always going to have a conflagration. So let's not get it twisted. When you have people that will come and say, oh, well, you have to respect it because it's peaceful. Oh, it's not about this, it's not about that. No, if you protest during the national anthem, I don't care who, where, or what you're protesting, people are going to have a problem with it. So that's kind of where I like to set the baseline for it. Remember where we came from, and remember why there's such a strong response to it. Damani, what are some of your takeaways from it, and especially with Nike making Colin the head of their 30th anniversary ad campaign?
Right. So the whole, first off, I agree with what you said earlier, and you touched on a lot of the great points that I wanted to bring up. As often happens in this channel, one person will steal the thunder of the other, but that's beyond the point. I digress. But when we saw Nike's ad come out just a few days ago, it said, "Believe in something, even if it means sacrificing everything." And I found that statement to be untrue on its face, or at least non-applicable to the athlete they chose to portray such an image. Let's be very clear. Colin Kaepernick was languishing on the sidelines because he had proved to be comparatively inept at the skill of playing quarterback for the San Francisco 49ers. He had a contract where he was going to receive $14.9 million or $14.2 million for the first year, and then $11.9 or $11.2 for the second year, right? He was actually offered another contract in the aftermath of his dismissal from the San Francisco 49ers, but he actually chose to turn that down because he deemed it was too large of a pay cut. Now, we're talking millions of dollars here, bear in mind. So we're talking about the Denver Broncos offered him $7 million for 2 consecutive seasons, $7 million for each season, mind you. But he chose to say that he didn't think that it was enough money for him, therefore he made his exit. Or we thought he did. He is still dominating the news cycle. I still don't know how he did it, but what Nike's really done with this is, what we have to be careful too is people are now calling out Nike and saying, I'm gonna burn my Nike apparel and all. That's a little too visceral of a reaction. It's kind of playing into their hands. Mm-hmm. But what we see with Nike is they've shown they're willing to take a side. They knew how this was going to be perceived, but they chose to make the decision anyway. So whatever happens to them or their stock price or whatever will happen. But bear in mind that for them to superimpose the statement that they made before onto Colin Kaepernick's face is disingenuous because he never had to sacrifice anything. Colin Kaepernick has been blessed, or who was blessed up till 2016, to be able to make incredible sums of money playing a child's game. This is the only country on the face of the earth where you can do that full time and live better than people who've been working for 30, 40, 50 years. This is a fact. So to imply that he sacrificed something by protesting the national anthem is completely untrue. And bear in mind also, Colin Kaepernick was also called on the carpet for wearing socks that portrayed police officers as pigs. So when it's clear that someone wants to be willfully incendiary and willfully divisive, I find it wholly unfair for people to say, oh, this person's not, he's just trying to be peaceful and peacefully protest, because while the protest itself may not be inherently violent, what it is intended to do is to divide and cause consternation for broad swaths of the American populace. Now, what we also have to do is compare Colin Kaepernick to another mixed race quarterback by the name of Dak Prescott here in my current city of Dallas, Texas.
How about them Cowboys?
Exactly. Well, yeah, I'm a Texans fan, but you know what? We'll talk about that different day. But basically, Dak Prescott, he came out several months ago and said, you know what? I'm not going to protest during the national anthem. That's not the time that I think is appropriate to protest. Mm-hmm. And so you would assume that people who saw Dak Prescott take this stand would have to say, you know, I respect him for making this decision, even though it's unpopular. That's the logical response to that. What you saw instead was people coming out of the woodworks, calling into question Dak Prescott's blackness, even, which I don't know why that's a common thing. I don't really understand it. But they were saying, oh, well, you must not really be black, or you're a disgrace to the race, or we want your black card, as if a black card is a real thing. I mean, come on.
And they have the exact same ethnic background, Dak Prescott and Colin Kaepernick. They're both half black, half white, just like Obama. So the whole black card phenomenon doesn't even make any sense on his face when juxtaposing the two.
Exactly. So at the risk of waxing too loquacious with this point, what's interesting to note is that there's a reaction to Colin Kaepernick and there's a reaction to Dak Prescott, and the two are completely dichotomous. And the problem with that is because we as a culture, specifically African American culture, have deemed that there is only one right way to perceive the world around you. It's almost as if there's some handbook that apparently Eddie and I didn't get when we were born of how to act. You know, oh, so someone's proceeding the anthem, flip, flip, flip. What should I do? What should I think? Because everybody else is doing it. That is an abdication of critical thought and deductive reasoning and overall individuality. And what we always have talked about on this channel is being willing to rise above identity politics, to challenge the status quo and believe what you believe, because you've done your own due diligence to find the answers to those questions, not ascribing holistically to a hive-minded groupthink of perceived oppression just because it's the in vogue thing to do. Eddie, I'll throw it to you because we could talk about this all day, obviously. But there's so much to talk about with this, and it's so disappointing to see that Colin Kaepernick has just chosen to insert himself yet again into political discourse. And Nike has chosen to stand with him. People like Dak Prescott don't get a fair shake. What's your take on all that?
Well, my take on it is everybody holds these events, any current event, up against their own personal background. And of course, you and I growing up, we were military brats. We grew up in, about half our childhood was spent in Military City, USA, San Antonio, Texas, where I currently reside. And we grew up where if you heard the retreat being blown for the colors off base, you would see cars stop on the highway and wait for retreat to finish being played and then proceed on their way. That is the respect that our community always had for the flag, and it didn't matter whether you were black, white, Hispanic, none of that. That what mattered was the flag is being respected. That's what needs to be at the center of our focus right now. So my personal druthers are, it's First Amendment. You can do whatever you want, right, as long as it's under the auspices of your employer. And that's a whole nother relationship that we can probably do an entire other video on, given that we're both have business backgrounds. But what I always like to come back to is that when it comes to a protest, you always need to make sure that the goal is clearly defined. And one of the popular acronyms to define goals is SMART goals. They should be specific, they should be measurable, they should be attainable, they should be realistic, and they should be time bound.
Right.
The problem with the National Anthem kneeling protest is it is none of those things. It is extremely nebulous on its face. It was not adequately defined at the start. Obviously, like we said, it just started with him sulking on the bench. There's no time specific period where it's going to end by. There's no specific goals where if your goal is just to eradicate racism, we will be doing it until the cows come home. That's not realistic. So if it's just something where we're just going to keep on doing this ad infinitum, then I foresee it losing steam. It'll always be a conversation piece, but as far as the efficacy of it, it really serves no purpose at this point other than to divide and give people on either side a chance to virtue signal. And honestly, at this point, especially as an avid sports fan, I'm sick of it. I'm sick of entertainers interjecting themselves with their politics into what is supposed to be a unifying period for all. I'd like to see it end, but unfortunately, it appears to be trending in the opposite direction. So, Damani, how do you see us dealing with it going forward? And you can take us home from here.
What we always say on this channel is identity politics is dead. We say that as a hopeful mantra because we hope that that's the point that our society is going to reach in the future. We envision a future where people are able to say exactly how they feel and not be judged thereby because they've done their due diligence and just because they come away from a certain situation thinking differently than the majority of their demographic. So at the risk of running too long with this video, what we want to do is we want to ask, what do y'all think about Colin Kaepernick, the Nike ad, Dak Prescott, basically the current state of the NFL as it stands today. We want to hear your thoughts as well, because y'all's input is just as valuable, if not more valuable than our input. We're just the two voice pieces who are out here right now just trying to spread the word identity politics is dead, because we want to help us all get there together. So if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help us out. Also, please share and subscribe, comment if you haven't already. We appreciate each and every one of y'all. So without further ado, we're going to go ahead and let you get back to your day. Thanks, and gig 'em.
Thanks, and gig 'em.
The first revolution is to change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown. The revolution will not be televised, there'll be no rerun, brothers and sisters. The revolution